You know that feeling when everything seems under control for the team, but there's something in the background that just doesn't sit right? Like a situation that could turn into a much bigger deal if it's not handled the right way. That's exactly where things stand right now, and it's the kind of storyline that might not look urgent today, but could change a lot about the future if it unfolds differently than expected. Be sure to click the like button and stick with me. I'll keep you well informed. Go Seahawks! The Seahawks are staring at a situation that could quietly turn into one of the most important contract storylines this franchise has faced in years, and it all centers around Devon Witherspoon, and a question that, honestly, a lot of fans weren't asking loudly enough. Until now. Because while everything on the surface points toward Seattle eventually getting a deal done with their star corner, there's a growing concern behind the scenes that the price tag might not just rise. It might explode into something that reshapes the entire market. This all started gaining traction when a league insider raised a very real possibility. What if Devon Witherspoon doesn't just want to become the highest-paid cornerback in the NFL? What if he wants to completely reset the market? And when you actually sit down and think about it, that's not some wild, unrealistic demand. It's actually rooted in everything we've seen from his performance, his versatility, and the way the league itself is evolving. Now, let's connect the dots, because this didn't happen in isolation. The Seahawks came into this offseason with two major extension priorities: Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Devon Witherspoon. They made it clear early on that both players were essential to the future. Young, elite talents with leadership qualities and room to grow into the faces of the franchise. And Seattle handled the first part of that plan exactly how you'd want. They locked down JSN quickly. That move, on its own, looks like a win across the board. JSN gets paid, the Seahawks secure a top offensive weapon, and structurally, the deal is expected to age well as more wide receivers around the league get their contracts. But here's where things get complicated. Because wide receiver money has been skyrocketing, and when one position's value jumps like that, it doesn't stay isolated. It creates ripple effects, especially for positions directly tied to it. And that brings us right back to Witherspoon. If wide receivers are getting paid more and more, what does that mean for the guy whose job is to shut them down every single week? That's the exact question being asked right now. And when you look at how other positions with similar impact, like edge rushers and offensive tackles, tend to rise together financially, it starts to feel like cornerbacks are overdue for a major correction. So now, imagine you're Devon Witherspoon. You're not just a good corner. You're not just a Pro Bowl-level player. You're someone who can line up anywhere, outside, in the slot, blitzing off the edge, even stepping into roles that look more like a linebacker at times. That kind of versatility isn't normal. It's rare to the point where there really isn't a clean comparison anywhere else in the league. And that's where the leverage comes from. Because when a player can legitimately say, "There's no one else who does what I do," that's when negotiations stop being about matching the market and start becoming about redefining it. The idea being mature right now is that Witherspoon wouldn't just edge past the current top-paid corner. He could surpass that number by $4 or even $5 million per year. That's not a small bump. That's a statement contract. And if you're Seattle, here's the uncomfortable truth. You don't really have a counter. The Seahawks are in a position where they almost have to say yes to whatever that number ends up being. Witherspoon isn't just another piece in the defense. He is the identity of it. There's no replacement waiting in the wings who can replicate his role. The scheme flexibility he provides, the physicality, the impact in multiple phases of the game. You don't just find that in the draft or free agency. At the same time, there's another layer of pressure building across the league. Christian Gonzalez in New England is also emerging as a top-tier corner, and his contract situation could directly influence Witherspoon's number. If Gonzalez gets paid first and resets the market, Seattle could be forced into an even more expensive negotiation. But if the Seahawks act first, they might be able to control just how high that number climbs. So timing matters, strategy matters. But ultimately, talent like Witherspoon tends to dictate its own outcome. And here's where things get even more interesting. Even if Witherspoon resets the market, it doesn't necessarily hurt Seattle immediately. The cap continues to rise, and depending on how the deal is structured, the real financial impact might not even be felt until years down the line. But long-term, that's where tough decisions start creeping in. About roster depth, about future signings, about how much flexibility you're willing to sacrifice to keep a generational defensive weapon. Because make no mistake, that's what this is really about. This isn't just a contract negotiation. It's a statement about how the Seahawks value elite defensive talent in a league that's increasingly driven by offense. And the deeper you look into it, the harder it becomes to argue against Witherspoon's case. The production, the versatility, the leadership, the trajectory, it all points in one direction. The only real uncertainty left is whether Seattle is ready to meet that moment financially, or if this negotiation becomes more complicated than anyone expected. So now I want to hear from you. If Devin Witherspoon really pushes to reset the entire cornerback market, do you think the Seahawks should give him whatever he asks for? Or is there a limit they shouldn't cross? And this is where the situation starts to shift from being just a contract discussion into something that could define the Seahawks' roster-building philosophy for the next several years. Because once you accept the reality that Devin Witherspoon can ask for anything and realistically deserves it, you also have to accept what comes next if Seattle says yes. We're talking about a deal that wouldn't just make headlines the day it's signed. It would ripple through the locker room, through future negotiations, and through every major decision John Schneider has to make moving forward. Because when you commit that level of money to a defensive player, even one as unique as Witherspoon, you're making a very clear bet on what wins in today's NFL. And here's the fascinating part. Everything about Witherspoon challenges the traditional way teams think about defense. This isn't just a lockdown outside corner who shadows a number one receiver all game. This is a player who can blitz like an edge rusher, crash into the run game like a linebacker, and still hold up in coverage at an elite level. That kind of versatility doesn't just help your defense. It changes how offenses have to prepare for you. It forces quarterbacks to hesitate, coordinators to adjust, and entire game plans to bend around one player. So when people talk about paying him top corner money, the real argument from his side is probably this. Why should he be paid like a traditional corner when he doesn't play a traditional role? That's where the idea of a true market reset becomes not just possible, but logical. And from Seattle's perspective, the pressure is only increasing the longer this situation lingers. Because every day that passes without a deal is another opportunity for the market to shift. Another opportunity for a player like Christian Gonzalez to sign first. Another opportunity for the price to go from expensive to unavoidable. At the same time, there's no indication that this is heading toward a breakup. In fact, the expectation around the league still leans toward a deal getting done, potentially even during training camp. But expectations don't eliminate risk. They just delay the moment where everything comes to a head. And internally, the Seahawks know exactly what they're dealing with. This isn't a situation where you can play hardball and hope the player caves. The leverage is entirely on Witherspoon's side. As it was said, Seattle really doesn't have a card to play here. You either pay him, or you accept the consequences of letting a one-of-one defensive talent even get close to the open market. Now, could this deal hurt the Seahawks? In the short term, probably not. The salary cap continues to rise, and smart structuring can soften the immediate impact. But in the long term, this is where things get real. Big contracts stack up. Young players need extensions. Free agents cost more every year. And eventually, every team runs into the same question. How many elite contracts can you carry before the depth of your roster starts to suffer? That's the balancing act Seattle is walking into. Because on one hand, letting a player like Witherspoon go, or even hesitating to pay him, sends the wrong message. It tells your locker room that even elite, homegrown talent isn't guaranteed to be rewarded. On the other hand, fully committing to a market-resetting deal means you're building your future around the idea that he will continue to be not just great, but generational. And based on everything we've seen so far, that's a bet the Seahawks might be willing to make. He's improved year after year. He impacts the game in ways stats don't fully capture. He's already being talked about as the best corner in football, not just one of them. And maybe most importantly, there's a sense that he hasn't even peaked yet. So now it comes down to one final reality. This isn't about whether Devon Witherspoon deserves the money. It's about whether the Seahawks are ready to reshape their financial future to match his value. Because if they are, this deal gets done, and it probably changes the cornerback market forever. If they hesitate, even a little, this could become one of the most uncomfortable negotiations this fan base has watched in a long time. And if you're sitting there as a Seahawks fan, watching all of this unfold, you already know what's at stake. This isn't just about numbers on a contract. It's about keeping a player who feels like the identity of your defense for years to come. Now, before you go, make sure you subscribe to the channel, drop a like if you're riding with Witherspoon no matter what, and click the video that's on your screen right now, because if you want Seahawks news the moment it happens, this is exactly where you're going to find it first. Go Seahawks!